Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's a great pleasure to welcome all of you to this side event, which is enabling result-based payment for REDD, which is jointly organized by RED R&D Center of Japan and the International Tropical Timber Organization in partnership with many of the leading agencies around the world. So I have the pleasure of serving the moderating of this session. My name is Ma Hwanuk. I'm from the International Tropical Timber Organization. ITTO is located in Yokohama, Japan. I believe this is one of the clean and quiet city, but we had a very serious mission for promoting the sustainable forest management in the tropic. So we know very well the under the Paris Agreement, particularly the Article 5 of Paris Agreement, encouraging the country to implement and support REDD Plus and the JMA, Joint Mitigation Adaptation Approach, through the result-based payment. So I believe this article encouraged all the also the tropical country to implement and take action to move forward. At the same time, also support, also encouraging donor and also advanced country to provide financial assistance, which is necessary for implement the social action on the ground. So we know very well that nowadays, I mean, this around 15 countries they submit reference level and technical assessment have been made, and so this is one of the fast-moving area. So I think there are a lot of lessons to share with each other to move forward in the better formation. So, ladies and gentlemen, so this side event aim to discuss issue of the result-based payment, particularly the reference setting the lesson, as well as also so many the enabling condition for results-based payment in the future in the tropical country. So I'm sure this session will meet your some of expectation, as we have very outstanding speaker and the panel member with us today, and the participant, ladies and gentlemen. Also today we are very honored with the presence of the Mr. Suji Oki, Deputy Director General of Forest Agency of Japan, who is promoting very much the forest-based climate change mitigation and adaptation in Japan, also promoting the REDD as a the key organization. So I'd like to invite our Deputy Director General of Forest Agency Japan to give us some remark to these people of the presentation. Yeah, please.
Thank you. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this side event regarding REDD Plus hosted by ITTO, International Tropical Timber Organization, and FFPRI, Forest and Forest Products Research Institute, Japan. I'd like to extend my sincere appreciation for your attendance. I am very pleased to participate in this side event here in Marrakesh as a representative of Japanese government with distinguished experts on REDD Plus. In the Paris Agreement entered into force on the 4th of this month, REDD Plus was confirmed clearly as one of the most important climate change mitigation measures and encouraged its implementation and support. With this as a turning point, I expect efforts for REDD Plus will become bigger to the future. However, there remain various challenges for the full-scale implementation of REDD+ in developing countries. The UNFCCC stipulates that REDD+ activities are implemented at national or sub-national level, and 15 countries had already submitted forest reference emission levels on their country to UNFCCC. On the other hand, parallel to the international discussion, a lot of the REDD+ demonstration activities at the project levels have been implemented by multilateral or bilateral cooperation, private sectors, and NGOs towards realization of result-based payment for REDD+. It becomes increasingly important in the future. In order to ensure consistency of forest reference emission levels among at project, sub-national and national levels in each country, Japan will continuously support the technological transfer and the human resources development in tropical countries for the implementation of REDD+. In this side event, we have presentations about current situation and further challenges for construction forest reference emission levels in several tropical countries, and discussion for the effective implementation of REDD+. In closing, I will end my remarks by wishing you all the best and this side event the success for giving the opportunity for the advancement result-based payment for REDD+. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, DDG of the Forestry of Japan. We are very pleased to hear a very important message, continue the support, the humorous development of the REDD in developing country. Now I'd like to move to our presentation from our keynote speaker. It is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Maria Sanchez. I think many of you know well about Maria, extraordinary experience with not only implementation, negotiation and the implementation REDD in the many countries. So currently she is a scientific director of Basque Center of Climate Change Spain. I saw that she also attended the previous side events, so we appreciate your continued the contribution to many events. And particularly Maria, currently she is working on the effective land use decision, the optimal allocation of land resource for sustainable and efficient. Prior to joining the Basque Center for Climate Change Spain, Maria worked at the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, and the scientific also officer at the UNFCCC as a Secretariat, supporting at the time the land use and the land use change and forestry, agriculture, and REDD negotiation up to 2011. So this is my great pleasure to invite you to make a presentation. Are you going to hear where you can use either here or so any here? If you wish.
What do you prefer?
If you wish. You know very well.
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay, it's fine?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I have to say thanks to the government of Japan and the organizers for inviting me. I feel sometimes embarrassed because you invite me so many times, but
Thank you very much.
thank you so much. This speech is just trying to go through a little bit into where we stand in terms of reference levels, and it's done from the perspective of the technical assessment of the convention. which was settled out of the Warsaw Framework. But that doesn't mean that the work on reference levels started when the Warsaw Framework was adopted. And I think this is something very important we have to keep in mind. So basically, I will go through the process, submission technical assessment, and then we'll do some sort of very simple mapping of where the submissions stand, and some lessons and reflections that I've been collecting from myself and from other people I've been talking about after these 3 years of assessments. I mean, this is the context that you face in terms of how the reporting or the submission of the reference level and the assessment of the reference level gets into the context of the information requirements for REDD under the convention. And as you all know, there's 4 elements that have to be in place: the National Forest Monitoring System, the National Strategy, the System for Information for Reporting for providing the summary of safeguards, and the forest reference level, right? So the forest reference level is not in isolation. The country doesn't do a forest reference level in isolation. It doesn't in this context. And for different elements, you have different sort of ways to convey the information and ways to be or not exposed to some sort of assessment. So for example, in the case of the strategy, you just convey the strategy, right? So it's available, it's publicly available. In the case of the National Forest Monitoring System, you also do that. You just expose that so that people is aware how it's been done and so on. In the case of the national reference level or subnational reference level, you have to go through a submission process and then some sort of technical assessment that I have to say that countries have been taking a very constructive manner, and they have been recognizing almost everyone after every single assessment that has been extremely helpful for them. And they have been learning a lot through the process. And this is the process, right? This is the assessment process. And you see that it's equally important in terms of the assessment team and in terms of how the country interacts with the assessment team. So this process is very interesting because it allows for a very intense and continued interaction with the actual technical people in the country. And it's been resulting in many cases of already some improvements during the assessment process. And that's why many countries resubmitted the reference level after the assessment process. So it's a modified reference level after the assessment process. It's a long process. It takes a year. We thought a year was too long when we probably decided that. And now we're figuring out that a year may be too short because it's been taken as a learning process. The countries really want to intensify the interactions and they really want to keep going and going and going. And therefore, it gets quite a long process. And that's why this year you see that there was no reports published yet. It's because this process has been much more intense than in the previous 2 years. So, I mean, that's the world forest, right? In terms of where we have the countries or how many countries are being submitted reference levels. So how many countries are thinking in terms of REDD+ seriously? You take reference levels as an indicator of taking REDD+ seriously, is something like this, right? Those are the 15 countries. This is the coverage of the countries that are being submitting reference levels. You have in dark green the first year, which is Brazil, and then you have a very bright green is the second year, which was Mexico, Colombia, Guyana, and Ecuador. And then you have the 9 countries that, Malaysia, sorry, and Ecuador. It was the 9 countries that submitted this year. So 9 in Latin America, 3 in Africa, and 3 in Asia. If we try to say, okay, and what is covered in terms of a scope, what you see is that almost every country included deforestation. There is 5 countries that included degradation. 1 country included sustainable management of forest. 1 country indicates conservation a little bit in the last submissions. And there are 4 countries that are including enhancements, right? But the dominant activity is deforestation. In terms of scale, there are 11 countries of the 15 which are going national. There is 1 country that goes subnational in terms of administrative units. And there are 3 countries that go subnational sort of in terms of biomes. In terms of greenhouse gas inventories, we have CO2, which was expectable. And then only 2 countries are being considering non-CO2 greenhouse gases, N2O and methane. And Mexico originally included non-CO2 out of fires, but due to the fact that they couldn't disaggregate the fires from forest lands, from not forest lands, they decided to take it out. And hope that in the future they will be able to disaggregate, and then they will include the non-CO2 from fires in the submission, in the future submission. In terms of pools, well, the biomass pools are the ones that are covered by all. There is some coverage of litter by Costa Rica. There is dead wood by some countries, up to 6. There is solid organic carbon by some, up to 3. And one country indicated that they will include harvest wood products, but it's likely that they probably will drop it in the modified submission. So you see that the biomass is something that is quite widely spread, and there's a lot of data. So countries feel comfortable to do these estimations. But with the other pools, there is little data, so the countries are trying, but they are not yet there. In terms of forest definition, well, forest definition is an issue which is very much related to the national circumstances. Every country defines forest not for reporting to the REDD reference level or BOR. They define forest because that's what how they manage their forests, and therefore the definitions vary very much. So in terms of ground cover, you see that the ground cover varies between 10 to 30%. Some countries are also splitting the ground cover classes in 2 types of forests. So for example, Chile and Paraguay are considering forests up to 10% in some areas, but in other areas they have to be up to 20% because the type of forest. The tree height, they go more or less all up to 5, but there are some countries again, including the case of Paraguay, that they define the height in the function of the type of forest as well. And for example, that's also the case of Vietnam. There are also different approaches in terms of the broad construction of the reference level. And we all know that there's been a lot of discussion about if or not we could use projections, for example. And there was a lot of discussion during the negotiations about, how reliable the projections could be, but it was also recognized that some countries may need to adjust for national circumstances. And in that regard, what you see is that most of the countries are using historical average, so they are not going into more complex approaches, but some countries think they need to adjust for national circumstances, and Colombia was the first one, but now this year, Colombia and Guyana were the first one. Guyana reference level is a kind of globally adjusted with the global rate of deforestation, and Colombia adjusted 10% for national circumstances if the peace process takes over. And now we have Republic of Congo and Vietnam also sort of doing that. And Peru is using a linear regression. It's not a historical average. It's based on the historical trend, but it's a linear regression. So basically, that's the illustration of the types that we are seeing, or we could see. And the projections are not. No one has been doing projections as such so far. Another interesting fact is the periods for the reference levels, and later on the estimation for the results. You see here that most countries are going 2000 to start with the reference period. There's some countries that are going backwards, like Brazil or Malaysia or Indonesia, and as well as Costa Rica. But most of the countries are just going 2000. And then they can define 1 or 2 reference periods as well. And this is something I know that they will trigger a lot of discussion probably today. But what is the technical assessment about? Because I think it's important that we understand what is the technical assessment team trying to do. This is the guidance they have from the workshop framework. So they are assessing to what extent the value is consistent with the supporting information that the party does. And in this UNFCCC process, and it's being crystallized in the Paris Agreement, the transparency is being key. So it's very, very important that when you submit your reference level, you really are very transparent. You need to think that the one that reads is not yourself. And sometimes you don't put some data because you think they know, but they don't know. And you also have to be aware that this is a completely new process. Never before, no one was looking in that way developing countries' data. So, it's like when we started to assess greenhouse gas inventories, even for developed countries. The first years, no one was exposed to this data ever. And this is the case with the data of developing countries now. So we have to understand that as well. It's as hard for the country as hard for the technical assistant team. The other thing that they do is how historical data have been considered during the establishment. So what is the approach? How the historical data, and as you see, you saw in the previous slides that the historical average has been the most common approach so far. Then they go to the extent on which the information is transparent, complete, consistent, and accurate. And here you see that those principles are coming from the IPCC guidance. And there's one which is also there, which is comparability. But here the comparability was not included because, it's too early to see if you could really compare those data. That if you could really have standardized approaches for reference levels. So that's why this concept was sort of set aside a little bit, which doesn't mean that you should not try to be as much as comparable. It's also in the interest of the country to compare himself with some other countries around. The carbon pools are also something that you have to check. Are all the carbon pools reported? Why they are not reported? Are the carbon pools not reported significant? Can you justify why the exclusion was done? Also, is the forest definition is specific for the reference level, or is the same definition that it was reported to another international organization processes, including under the convention and the greenhouse gas inventory? And if it's not, why you are doing that? It's again an issue of transparency. To the extent of the data in the reference level is consistent with the greenhouse gas inventory, which doesn't necessarily mean you can find exactly the same number in both cases, because the greenhouse gas inventory is land-based reporting, while here you are reporting activities. So you have to be a little bit careful in comparing the numbers, but it's important that the raw data is the same and you're transparent in how those data are being used for both processes. This is what is important, that you are there. Whether the description of policies are there. And this is only relevant when you use policies for make adjustments or projections. Whether the assumptions about the future changes to domestic policies have been included. Again, relevant only if you do projections or adjustments. And of course, if applicable, which is not yet applicable because we're not yet there, how much of the recalculations in former reference levels are being done. And this is something that we are not there yet, so there's not been done yet. In terms of uncertainties, which is something that many people is worried about it, some countries are being in trying to estimate error related to some of the activity data or emission factors, and few countries are trying to do an overall estimate of uncertainty. What the decision of the Warsaw Framework says is that you have to address uncertainty as far as you can, and taking into account your national circumstances and capacities. And I have to remind you that uncertainties has been also the devil of many of the developed countries in the inventories. It's been until very recent that the uncertainties have been improved substantially in the reporting under the greenhouse gas inventories. So let's go to some of the emerging lessons that I want to share with you. It is fundamental, the success of the technical assessment process and any international credibility associated to this assessment is critical. And because that, I think countries have to be very much trying to convey the information very transparently, because at this point in time, when we're starting to learn, the transparency is the best and most important tool for credibility. The technical assessment process should be prepared to explain, in the exchange with the country has to be prepared to explain how they did things, why they did things, and what, if at all, they want to change things, and how they're foreseeing this process. And this is very important, because the first thing that technical assessment people, because they're technical people, try to do is reconstructing your reference level, You know, as a technical and as a scientist, what you try is to reconstruct what the other did, because this provides you the assurance that this has been done in a way that is good enough. There are also some emerging lessons on where to focus more at this point in time. And what you see is that the forest reference submissions are countries on the view of many already should address the sources of the systematic bias. What is important sometimes is not to be too precise, but not to be biased. That's at this point in time something that is very, very important, because this will enable and help the technical assessment team to assess better your methods and results, and facilitate much more a constructive exchange of suggestions for improvement. And this is to be done rather than strive for a specific target for uncertainty. You know, if you have a target of reduce my uncertainty down to 5%, you know, this is some ways that people address things. No, that's the goal, reducing the uncertainty. I think instead of that, you should try to transparently estimate the uncertainty. And if it's high, it's no problem. I mean, it's high, but you did it in a transparent manner. And then you move forward a process of trying to reduce as much as you can the uncertainty, which is not necessarily easy. Another thing which is emerging is that sometimes, or most of the times, a smarter stratification approach is one way that can be used to develop an efficient process for identifying sources of uncertainty and minimize their effect in the reference level. Since completeness may be useful in the longer term, we know that we cannot be complete from the beginning, right? So adding additional pools and categories is going to be a process, and more than hoping that those will be included from the beginning. Right, and this applies to both, to reference levels and to greenhouse gas inventories. And I think it's very important that when you think in these terms of increasing the categories and the pools or even the activities, you think on both processes, your greenhouse gas inventory on the AFOLU sector, together with what you're doing in REDD, because otherwise it's a very high risk of running into inconsistencies. And there is a potential for leakage of emissions to non-including categories and areas within the country, and we know that. And this is something that you have to reflect upon when you do the selection of your choices, and when you explain why the choices have been done and what is the future that you're going to do, what your stepwise approach is going to be. As countries determine the scope of the reference levels in terms of including activities or pools, they may need data which is not of very high quality, right? And again, transparency becomes an issue. You have two choices. You either wait until better data is there, and I know every single country is very anxious in sharing the reference level, or you just declare very honestly what the quality of the data is, and that you have been doing that because you want to really see how it works and how it could be improved. Using different categories, definitions, or stratification schemes to the reference level and the greenhouse gas inventory, as well as in the forest monitoring system, which is supposed to provide the data for both, or hopefully, can create inconsistencies and can cause challenges in the monitoring. So that, again, when you do this in your greenhouse gas inventory and in your reference level, and later on in your BOR annex, you have to be aware that you cannot, or it will be desirable not to use different classification systems, and it will be desirable to use some sort of very consistent certification. And I know that this is very difficult because in many cases the greenhouse gas inventory is done by another department, and the reference level is done by another unit. But I will say it should be encouraged to have very early communication of those two teams. And I mean, I've been exposed personally to cases where this was foreseen to be very difficult, and at the end, when they really connected, they were the most efficient in Earth because the technical people was connected. And they are so happy to work together. They don't have any problem of working together. So sometimes it's more an issue of relationship between departments than the capacity and the willingness of technical people to do so. Comparability. Well, parties did not require to be assessed for comparability, as I said before, but they could potentially achieve many benefits by working together on trying to see how greater comparability can be achieved. And this has to be an informal exercise. I mean, you're not going to be assessed, but in the future, it may be good to go in that direction. Not fully comparable, because we are also fully different, right? So that's important to keep in mind. I mean, countries see challenges in defining forests. This is part of the issue of comparability, for example. The different forest definitions are one of the things that don't allow for full comparability. And this is not necessarily bad, because you are defining your forest in function of what you want to do with your forest as well, as I said before. And we know it will be difficult. We tried in the past, and it will be difficult or impossible to harmonize the forest definitions. So we should not try that. And then finally, I mean, my overall reflections are in the effort to maintain consistent assessments across countries should be a priority for the technical assessments. And I think is one of the few contexts in which this can be done is in the context of the technical assessments under the UNFCCC, because this has been the culture of the inventory reviews, the BOR reviews, and it's the only place where you can try to have a consistent interaction between experts. The experts are working together. The way the assessments are done, for example, centralized, at least for the year, all the experts can be exposed to each other, so they can decide or they can discuss how most consistently approach issues which are popping up more or less the same in different technical assessments. So to be fair in terms of how to assess the countries. So countries should learn from the technical assessments that are already done. I mean, I think the first thing that now that we have 15, the first thing that you have to do is to read the assessments from the others before you put in place a submission, for example. No? I'm pretty sure that you will learn a lot about that. It will help you to see what issues could be potentially rise. And maybe you will decide that you don't want to introduce certain things because you don't want this issue or you're not prepared to respond to this issue. So you start more simple. Additional capacities and resources may be necessary to sustain, improve the quality of technical assessments. And I'm pretty sure that my colleagues from the Secretariat that are present here are very happy that I'm saying that. But I think it's very important because in this process of the UNFCCC, we always forget. I mean, we talk a lot about commitments, about targets, about reporting, but we always forget that this is very important. It has to be done on the ground. And I still remember when I was a reporting expert many years ago, and it was so difficult to convey to my minister, look, this is very important. You have to put resources in there. And they were looking to me, what are you telling to me, right? So I think exactly for the international process, for the assessments, for maintaining good critical mass in terms of technical people in the roster, it's very important that the resources are there. And also important that the countries maintain those guys that are called for assessments, and they are, pushed and required by their governments to go, because it's a responsibility, it's a collective responsibility to do these things. Over-reliance on consultants and other partners could be detrimental on the long term. I think we all are sensitive to this. We all are aware of this because we are all willing that the country own the reference level. They own the data, they own the decisions, they own the responses. And we know that in the early stages it's difficult. You need support, and many of the even the cooperations, the bilateral cooperations, are trying to help. And we are all in a hurry, and we all want to do things. But on the long run, the countries should become independent. They should become, owning the reference level, owning the information. And I hope this will happen soon. I mean, there are already many countries which are showing a very strong ownership. And I would say all the countries are showing a strong ownership on the reference level. They are maybe a little bit more or less delayed in terms of being able to manage all the information or being able to do the uncertainties, and they may need support on that. Forest reference levels and in general MRV are interconnected. So don't disconnect those things. Don't put a team of people doing the reference level and a team of people doing the greenhouse inventory and another team of people doing the BOR. At least if you have 3 teams, you have to put them in a retreat 1 day a week. right? And it is important to bolster the credibility of the REDD Plus, because the REDD Plus has been something that we all hope is going to contribute substantially to the challenge that we are facing and to the Paris Agreement. So I think this process is a process which is growing, is a process which is learning by doing. And many or some of the people that has been already engaged in the assessments is also in this room. So I hope that we can all share some of our experiences in that regard, not only my overall reflections. So thank you very much. And I wish you a very nice discussion in the panel.
Thank you very much, Maria, for your very comprehensive presentation. Also, you brought many the jargon, many the keywords. I learned, the last ability of the REDD. The many C I also learned, like the consistency and the comparability and the complexities. I think I learned also is the credibility. Thank you very much, Maria. Now I'd like to invite the next speaker, Dr. Yasumasa Hirata, Director of the Center of Japan, and he's leading this R&D capacity building in this very important R&D think tank in Japan. He's one of the co-author of the RED Plus book. This is one of the flagship reports published by the RED R&D Center. This is now available in the Spanish and also other languages. So it's my pleasure to invite Dr. Hirata to make a presentation.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Maha, for detailed introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Yasumasa Hirata, and I'm Director of Climate Change and REDD Research and Development Center and Forestry and Forest Product Research Institute. Today, thank you for joining our side event concerning reference setting and result-based payment in REDD Plus. Today, we would like to share the experience in reference setting and consider the result-based payment from the monitoring results using reference level. So here I'm preparing 3 key messages. The first one is result-based payment requires reliable estimate of forest carbon stock change, of course. So everyone knows this importance. However, there are some difficulties to prepare the reliable data, as Maria mentioned, at a national scale. Compared with other sector, the amount is very huge in this sector. So we need to take care of the preparation of the data. The second one is REDD Plus includes not only deforestation, but also forest degradation and conservation, sustainable management, and enhancement. And first, we started to discuss on deforestation and forest degradation in the negotiation in the COP13. And we added the conservation, sustainable management, and enhancement. Of course, they are very important, but from technical side, it's very difficult to quantify as carbon stock change. In addition, technical problems in the monitoring still remains. The third one is a little bit technical one. How to obtain emission factor? It is a quite a simple question, but this affects on the estimate of emission very strongly. Particularly the country where the degradation proceeds. In such a country, we should take care of the emission factor because the average of forest carbon stock per unit area continuously change due to the degradation of forests. So, sorry. So when we start discussion of REDD Plus in UNFCCC, Many experts point out the difficulty of identification of forest degradation. But of course, exact amount estimation is very difficult. But if we set some class of carbon stock per unit area, for example, high carbon stock area, medium carbon stock area, and low carbon stock area, we can identify a degradation as the change of carbon stock class. Of course, deforestation, it's relatively easy to identify. So in many countries, start from identification of deforestation, particularly using remote sensing data. And correction of interpretation. Oh, sorry. And now we use the two-step ground truth data correction to get reliable data set. First step is interpretation of Google Earth. Already UN REDD recommend this method, so many countries adopt this method. But then second point is important in the field confirmation of land cover type and biomass estimation, particularly if you introduce forest degradation and biomass estimation in the field is very important process. So this is the correction of interpretation in the field, and also we accumulate the data set of the field. Because not only the officer in the field, but also many experts use such a data for setting reference level and evaluate, accumulate carbon stock change. Now we introduce drone to evaluate and identify land cover change in the field. So I conclude my talk. Executable treatment of degradation is required in reference setting because in many countries a portion of forest degradation is relatively large. And verification of the results is a very important component to obtain reliable results. So even after submitting the reference level, we should verify the result, modify the result, adjust the results. So I guess that's all today I would talk to you. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. for bring up the important issue of the forest degradation. So I believe our audience also will have, after all the presentation, will have the question and answer session from the Maria, and all the speakers will be ready. Ibu Novia Widyaningtyas, head of REDD Plus Division of Director of Climate Change Mitigation, also Director General of Climate Change of the Ministry of Environment, Forestry of Indonesia. I believe she will share with us the Indonesian experience on the forest reference, the emission level toward the full implementation of REDD in the future.
Thank you, Dr. Ma. I'd like to share with you here our experience in establishing our forest reference emission level at the national level, with some reflection on how we can use this experience towards full implementation of REDD+. So I'm not exactly the part of technical team of forest reference emission level in my country, but I would like to see it as a whole within the whole picture of REDD+ preparation in Indonesia. So this is our Indonesian National Forest Reference Emission Level have been submitted to the Secretariat of the UNFCCC. In terms of reference period, we use 1990 to 2011. 2012, and then also for the activities, we put deforestation and forest degradation because these two activities are the main or having major contribution from the LULUCF sector. So it's around 37.7% of total national emissions. And for the calculation, we use average annual emission with the historical emission from deforestation and forest degradation. And for the method, we use carbon stock difference. And also for the pool, we consider above ground biomass and soil carbon in peatland. Why we put above ground biomass? Because this pool is the major contributor of the emission out of the 5 pool. And also regarding the data availability, we have very limited data for the other pools. And area for calculation, we consider all land, mineral and peatlands, area that covered by natural forest, primary and secondary in year 1990, and it's all accounted for 113.2 million hectares, or 60% of the country area. And for the gas, we put carbon dioxide. So I think we are familiar with the principle of transparency, accuracy, completeness, consistency, and compatibility. And also we use the concept of practicability and also cost effectiveness when we establish this forest reference and emission level. And as a result, this is our national forest reference emission level. I won't go to the technical detail because we are running out of time. But we put in these two graphs the annual rate of deforestation in this period, and also forest degradation, annual rate of forest degradation, and we put the graphs because there are some percentage that are high in some places, in some island, and there are some islands who has lower percentage. And this is the graphs of our overall national forest reference emission level. You may wonder why at some period we have very high. That's because of the forest fire, illegal logging, encroachments, and many other things. And the contribution in general, the emission from deforestation count for 51%, from peat decomposition 39%, and from forest degradation 10%. And I'd like to highlight on the importance of subnational level in terms of scale. When we talk about forest reference emission level in relationship with the implementation of REDD+ in Indonesia. Yes, because subnational for us is very important because we use the concept of national approach with subnational implementation. So we put attention on the subnational because it's, the first reason is that subnational level is bridging missing link between REDD+ at project level, because we have so many projects in the earlier stage of REDD+, and between project and national level, and also subnational level play a role in REDD+ readiness preparation, and therefore the consistency, the aspect of consistency and coherence is very important when we want to link between subnational and national level. Yes, we have. I think we have already know about the 3 points why subnational level is important, and also we realize that with a national forest reference level submitted, but we have to realize that there are some provinces who might also develop baseline emissions as basis for measurement of their emission reduction achievement. So the question is how we do link this and how we maintain the coherence between this. I think this is one of our biggest challenges today. And therefore, now we are in the process of developing guidance for sub-national forest reference emission level. And we believe that consistency and coherence in the forest reference emission level is one challenge toward full implementation of REDD+. And this consistency is across different potential scale of implementation and also in terms of the methodology and so on. And I would like to close my presentation with some lessons learned. I think we also learned from Maria's presentation that when we talk about process, we always think about clarity, transparency, accuracy, completeness, and consistency. Well, for the comparability, even though at the international level, it might not be very easy to do, but we also think about that when we talk about our 35 provinces. And it's very challenging, Maria. It's very, very difficult because we have to think about fairness also. Equity, fairness, but also transparency, accuracy, and many things. So that's our biggest challenge today. And in terms of capacity, I think I agree with Maria that ownership is very important. Yes, we learned that during the past, we have three versions of forest reference emission level, and finally we got one submitted national version of forest reference emission, and we learn from the process that when we use national expert, we can learn so many things during the process. It doesn't mean that we don't need any help from a consultant, any international consultant, but when we use the expertise from our national expert, we learn a lot from them. And also we learn a lot from the consultation with multi-stakeholders. And also I think this is also giving a benefit and advantage from us in terms of how we can serve a basis or provide the basis for the further discussion with other agencies who have expressed an interest in supporting Indonesia in this undertaking, and also how we move forward together towards full implementation with result-based payment for REDD+. And the last thing is that we really realize that there are three dimensions that are very important when we are establishing forest reference emission level. The first one is science, the second one is practice, and the third one is policy. So when we are now developing our guidance for sub-national forest reference emission level, we always think about these three dimensions: science-based, practicability, and also policy. I think that's all from Indonesia, and thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Nubia, for sharing the very diversified experience from the Indonesia. Next, I'd like to move to Dr. Elizabeth Phillips. She is the leading scientist from the Forestry Research Institute, Malaysia. So she is responsible for national implementation of REDD Plus in Malaysia. The way the technical assessment of Malaysia, the reference survey, was successfully completed. So I'm sure she will share very interesting with us. I mean, we look forward to your the introduction of your experience.
Thank you, Dr. Ma. Very good afternoon to all of you. You'll see my slide talks about implementation in Malaysia. It's simply because I know Maria is the first speaker. She will summarize everything. So if I want to talk about my reference level, then I'll have to borrow her slides. So because of that, what I've done is basically I want to provide you inputs. What's the rationale behind our reference level. I think that would be more interesting because all of you have seen our numbers. So it's good for us to just explain how did we get our numbers and what was the rationale behind it. Unlike all the countries in my region, left, rights, all from my region, we have developed it at our own national capacity with our own finance. So in terms of ownership, I think we can vouch. It is, we have full ownership of what we have done. We have no consultants. Everyone was labored to do this work, was not paid to do this work. It was additional work. So what was our reason for developing our reference level? And as Maria has mentioned, we are the only country that submitted for sustainable management of forests. Yeah, sustainable management of forests, simply because that's where our policy lies. Our policy is on managing our forests, and from that we will reduce our degradation and reduce our deforestation. We hope we do not have to go to areas that we would need to enhance carbon stocks. So we have both a long-term and short-term policy, which looks at maintaining at least 50% of our land area forested, 54.5% land area forested, and we have an ambitious goal where we are changing our forests as a commodity to natural capital. And we are still struggling on how can we look at that. And we have two big projects. If you know, Malaysia has got two sites. We have the East Malaysian states, which is in Borneo, and we have the peninsular part, which is just sandwiched between Singapore and Thailand. So we have under the Peninsular Malaysia state a national program that's called Central Forest Spine, that's connecting the different forest types. And in heart of Borneo, that's also with Indonesia and Brunei, there's another project, Heart of Borneo. So these are the two big projects where investment by the government is, where we want to reduce degradation, we want to enhance forest management, and move towards forest certification, full forest certification by 2025. And how did we do ours? Sustainable forest management principles has been very close to our forests and our policy makers. So we build on that principles. We had forest monitoring system. Again, Maria said, you need to have your inventory and your REDD+ forest reference level work hand in hand. And this is where exactly what we did. When we completed our second national communications in 2008 for the inventories, we noticed that our LULUCF sector had some serious data gaps. Data gaps in the sense that we were not sure some of our figures that were reported. And so the government undertook a national exercise to actually verify our forest figures based on our statistics, based on the land registry and GIS. It was very expensive activity, and it took us like 7 years to complete this exercise. And we just completed this last year. And then we really understood where were the discrepancies in our land areas. So that was one of our foundation to actually develop our forest reference level. And we do have challenges, just like what Indonesia says. Land area is under subnational jurisdiction. It's not a federal government's jurisdiction. So we do have some issues there too. How do we address this? So we have the ministry coordinating all these three different regions. And that's how we developed ours. And of course, it's national budget, everything is cost effective. And the areas that we considered in our reference level were basically the PRF is permanent reserved forest, where commercial harvest is undertaken. And then we have new areas that is being gazetted in and out due to forest management activities, and areas which had extended harvesting rotation. And some areas were also considered forest conservation because they don't meet the EIA requirement. And why did we use this? Because it was embedded in our national plan. And I want to go a little bit different. I'm putting here the safeguards. Why am I putting safeguards? This is just to ensure us that our results that we have used had actually gone through some of the different requirements under the safeguards. So we looked at the environmental issues, we looked at the governance issues. So, and we have the forest certification process that takes place, and that has got different principles. And we match this against the safeguards under REDD+ and the forest management that reference level that we were submitting. And there was a lot of questions asked during our technical assessment, because what was transparent to Malaysia was not transparent to the reviewers. And Maria, perhaps also you mentioned transparent mean enabling the TTE to reconstruct the reference level. I think it's beyond that. It's just not reconstruction. I do think they were able to reconstruct ours, but understanding our rationale was not clear to them. And we thought some of these things are clearly embedded in many FAO reports. But the lesson learned is you still have to repeat all this. You cannot take anything for granted. So we did not clearly spell out some of these things, and there was some discussion, but we had asked our technical assessment to provide us, to guide us in some, we had some questions, but sad to say we have not got the answers too. But it was a very rich and very engaging process, in the sense that we had instant capacity building at some times, and other times it was more of explaining. And I know I have 1 more minute left, so I will go at extra fast speed. What I wanted to say is our lessons learned. I've already spoken some of our lessons learned. Here I've purposely put the REDD+ safeguards lessons learned as the first one, because that actually gives the credibility to our forest reference level. If you don't have this, you don't have the other one. So, so that's where we see ours. And you have lots of information. My country has a lot of information, but getting the most accurate and the most applicable information is the problem. So you have to assemble it in such a way, and then you have to ensure the TAC principles are also applied. So that's a challenge for us, especially when you're submitting it for a first time. You don't know what is enough and what is not enough. And you also have to meet expectation. When you ask information from people or you ask them to do some work, you have to meet the expectation. That's a problem. And if you look at the reviews, the reviewers' feedback, they ask you to do everything under the sun, as though money is not, I mean, as though resources is not limiting. So how do you go to that? And you need to work on a cost-effective approach. So that is something that is still mind-boggling, and probably we should need some kind of understanding what is sufficient. With that, thank you.
Very much, Elizabeth. She brought not only the reference, but the safeguard that came from the Malaysian Now, I'd like to invite the next speaker is the Chibin Leng, the MLB and the FRL, the focal point of the National REDD program of Cambodia. He is working at now the Ministry of Environment to promote REDD in the country. The floor is yours.
Hello. Thank you, Dr. Ma. And thank you to organizer to invite me to be here in this event. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Leng, represented from Cambodian to present you the Cambodian forest reference level. So please run out from the other two countries that sharing you the lesson learned for submission. So this year's Cambodian already announced that we are going to submit our forest reference level in this year, and then we are ready for next year tackle the technical assessment. But let me take this opportunity to present you not only the first reference level, but I will bring you some brief information and to the other two, which is national REDD Plus strategies and our national forest monitoring system, and of course it's FRIM, and how we are going to improve our FRIM within this year. As everyone aware, but in Cambodian, we are ready for three report document. First is FRIM that I already announced, and the other two is National REDD Plus strategies that it's already passed the technical consultation, and we are ready to move to the government endorse in early next year, I think. And the National Forest Monitoring System, we already complete the first step. So we also ready to put in UNCCC hubs and SIS, safeguard information under preparation process. So this is two important points that I would like to stress in here. Our national REDD Plus strategies will be going to implement within two phases. The first phase, it's starting from 2017 to 2020, which is after the government being endorsed. So we will be restructure our REDD Plus, and also the detailed implementation of REDD Plus action will be in place. The second phase is starting from 2021 to 2025. That our focus on fully implementation of REDD Plus MOV. That we expect to achieve the result-based payment. For NSMS, in general information that, as you may know, that Cambodian responsible for three agencies to have responsible for forest management, Ministry of Environment, which where IMS, and Forestry Administration, Fishery Administration under Ministry of Forestry and Fishery. For land use and land use cover mapping, we keep consistent within 4-year interval by updating 2-year cycle. And especially we are focused on 3 main forest types, evergreen, semi-evergreen, and deciduous forest type. And also the NFI. We are classified for upland, lowland, and coastal zone area. So each forest agency will be responsible to implement under their jurisdictional. And we expect to start the demonstration activity from 2017 next year. So what we are going to do with this, I think that we should be have proper plan and detailed activity to try to start our demonstration activity within some subnational area. This is for FREL's development Cambodian. Actually, we are already ready from last year, but just this year, our government been decided to announce on 1st of November, said that Cambodian going to be ready for submission and ready for technical assessment in next year. But during this 1 year, some activity also being conducted. Example, sorry, maybe I'm a bit moving ahead. So this is the historical period for considering establishment of FREL, which is considering 8 years period, which is starting from 2006, and the last update forest cover assessment in 2014. So you can see the trend for deforestation in Cambodia. But we are expected from, I mean that after the forest cover assessment by 2 year updating, so we expected that the deforestation rate was not higher like from 2010 to 2014. Within this 8 year, we are also considering including the national circumstance within this period. And also this one is following, as Maria said, that forest depletion is very crucial and difficult for every country to tackle. But Cambodian will also try to keep consistency. And also we are take out from the national forest definition of perennial crop, oil palm and rubber plantation. This is what I'm talking about, the plan for improvement of FREL. As I said that within this 1 year, a lot of activity has to be priority taken. First is accuracy assessment of change between 2006 to 2014. So we already support from FAO. We are conducting the change assessment from this period. That means that we are not only consider on a forest cover satellite image, so we have to be comparing with the ground checks. So our team is already ready to go for field and next month. Another one is we have to be consider also the development of allometric equation with each forest type. So last few months, we already did in one forest type, is DCJ forest type. So when we have capacity to complete different forest type, and then we will add to our forest reference levels report. Keep consistent, especially we will be keep interact within national greenhouse gas inventory, and especially the BUR that we are going to be prepare and read and complete in 2018. So especially we expect that after have common technical comment from UNFCCC technical assessment, and then our FREL will be improved in the last minute. So this is just like show you that the period that we are going to move forward, especially we are already complete the first phase, initial rails. So we are ready to move to second phase, and somehow it will lead to the third phase. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman, for sharing the Cambodian experience. Sorry about some of the time. Time is running out, but I'd like to invite our last speaker to Mr. Kwame Agyei. He's the senior manager of the National REDD Secretariat of Ghana Forest Commission. At the Secretariat, Kwame has responsibility for coordinating the development of Ghana Forest Reference Service, MLB, the framework, and also the REDD registry to support effective implementation of REDD in Ghana.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ma. And Ghana is very grateful for this opportunity. So REDD+ activities commenced in Ghana in about 2008. And since then, we've made very good progress. Now, Ghana is pushing the frontiers of phase 3, where we are thinking of actually implementing REDD+ activities. And we have a strategy in place, and the first program that we intend to implement is a program we've christened the Cocoa Forest REDD+ program. And it's focused on the southern part of the country, a zone that we refer to as the High Forest Zone of Ghana, which contains the Upper Guinean forest that is located in West Africa. So in developing our forest reference level, we chose to adopt a stepwise approach with an initial focus on this program area. The program area covers about 6 million hectares. And we felt that with the experience that we'll get from this subnational forest reference level, then we can upscale it to the national level. We expect, like Cambodia, to submit our national forest reference level by the end of this year. But for the subnational reference level, we've already submitted it to the Carbon Fund. And in doing work on our reference level, we've built on earlier works which has been completed in Ghana. And I want to highlight the wonderful support that the Japanese government gave us in undertaking the forest preservation program. But it was through that effort that Ghana was able to generate emission factors that we used in the current work towards design our forest reference level. So basically, we made sure that we effectively articulated our national circumstances when we started the work on our subnational reference level. So the forest was well defined, the area 1 hectare, the height 5 meters, and a canopy cover of 15. Through a very elaborate multi-stakeholder process, this definition came about. And also Ghana has developed a set of protocols. So it's these protocols, which are standard operating procedures, which was adopted in the steps that we took to come up with our numbers. We also selected our reference period, that is 2000 to 2015. And then we also did key category analysis to come up with what activities should we focus on, what are the pools that our focus should be on, and also what are the various components of each activity that our interest should be in. The 3 activities that we selected are deforestation, because from the tier 1 initial analysis that we did during the key category analysis, we realized that it's the major contributor of emissions in the country. We also touched on forest degradation, which had 4 subcomponents, and I will touch on that later, as well as carbon stocks enhancement. So for deforestation, the activity data, we got it from analysis of land use maps under the FPP, the one that the Japanese government helped us to undertake. We already had land use cover maps for 2000 and 2010. So in this current phase, we did a land use map for 2013 and 2015. And then we used the 2000 map as a base map and then assess the state of the forest till 2015. So we had our emission factors, as I said, from the program that we did, and we utilized the stock difference approach. So for carbon stocks enhancement, we focused on our reserves. Now, this was a component that we included because our government has an ambitious plan to undertake major plantation activities moving forward. So in defining our baseline for REDD+, we felt it was necessary to include carbon stocks enhancement activity. The focus was on the reserve, and then we had spatial data from one of the departments in the Forestry Commission. And also, the removal factors was also through a study that was undertaken by the Forest Research Institute of Ghana. Degradation had 4 components, as I said. Logging was the major contributor of emissions for the degradation. And here we didn't use remote sensing. We used an approach that was developed by Pearson et al., and which is accepted by the IPCC and even the UNFCCC. And it's based on the emissions associated with 1 cubic meter wood extracted. So for the legal logging, it was a bit easy. We already have the data. And then we did field measurement to come up with the emission factors based on the parameters in that research work. For illegal logging, there was also another study that we picked the amount of illegal logging in Ghana from, which is 4.1 million cubic meters, about 4 times the level of legal logging in the country. So fire and wood fuel, the contribution was very minimal. So here are the figures that we have for our subnational forest reference level. As I said, deforestation accounts for about 60% of emissions in Ghana. It is followed by illegal logging, which accounts for about a third of the emissions. And then legal logging is also the major contributor of emissions, accounting for almost 8%. At the moment, the enhancement activities are very minimal. And so we have a total emission of almost 44 million. And Ghana used, for the projection, we use the simple historical average to do the projection. So this is the average over the 15 years, which will be projected into the future. So my lessons learned, I'll just highlight the issue of reliance on consultants. Ghana had a similar issue, but so the work is done partly by consultants, areas that we don't have the capacity to engage consultants to do it. But in the current work, what we've input into that process is that the consultants need to build the capacity of technical people in the country, because in the near future, we have to replicate the methods. And it's therefore important for in-country capacity to be enhanced. So that was clearly spelled out in the terms of reference that we have. And also to highlight that definition of forest is very important, and then it should be done through a multi-stakeholder process. And in developing reference level, we also need to respect the principle of TAC. So these are the few words that I want to give today. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Kwame for sharing the experience, also bring some of the interesting the point which we can share. We are running up time, but I'd like to invite a few the question from our audience. I believe after also the session, the speaker will be here, around here, so we can have some interact. But I have invited some of our colleagues to, and also not only your question, also you can share your experience in your country, also your project. So can I invite some of your colleagues? Any colleague? Yeah, please.
My name is Reinhard Wolf from GIZ, German International Corporation. Question to Elizabeth. You are the only country which did not include deforestation. Does it mean that Malaysia does not have deforestation?
I can also ask the question in a reverse way. We did not include deforestation, does not mean that we don't have. But as I mentioned in my opening statement, our sustainable forest management addresses issues of deforestation. And we had shown our trends. The question that we posed to our technical assessment team is, we don't have a clear pattern. So how do we address deforestation? And I'm asking everyone, can someone tell us with our erratic pattern, how can we address this? So we have deforestation. We are not saying we don't have, but we have some issues with the figures, and we don't have a policy to reduce deforestation.
Hi, my name is Patrick Cage from the Greenhouse Gas Management Institute. I have a question for all of our in-country speakers. I'm eager to hear a little bit more about plans for monitoring against the reference level and where you feel your country is at in terms of capacity to do so. Where are there gaps and what plans are there to fill those capacity gaps? Thank you.
Yeah, this is very wide questions. Perhaps yeah, maybe can I invite one or two, and then we can have some. Okay.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much. I'm Sami Bakhit Mando from Sudan, Forest Inventory GIS Remote Sensing Administration, Forest National Corporation. Sorry, I came late, but I attend the presentation of Maria as the section of the forest definition. it is very important to define forests for each country, because each country has their own circumstances. In Sudan, if we use the definition of forests which used by FAO, it's explained our forest is very less. But actually, we have more forest area in Sudan. But the definition that used in FAO is not acceptable for our circumstances in Sudan. That is why I want to every country to have their own definition of forest on the concept of REDD, because we are seeking to do our forest national inventory. Maybe the coming year we will start it, and 2 years coming we have the third communication, which will depend on the data of inventory. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam. So this kind of the question, maybe more the broad policy formulation in developing country. So due to time, I like close and then, but I like to encourage our panel members. So Maria, you can talk about the Sudan some policy formulation, and then now the other speaker, particularly the capacity building, the need, and maybe some particular one point. I think from the Kwame, and then Chevin, maybe from here. So I think just one keyword, the capacity building, what require the capacity building.
Yeah,
there are many ways, so please.
So I think degradation is still an issue, particularly getting good data for illegal logging. So that would be a capacity need. In terms of monitoring, we want to do it every 2 years in Ghana. On the issue of forest definition, I just want to come in briefly. Countries are allowed to use their national circumstances to define their forests. We are not obliged in any way to use FAO's definition.
Thank you very much for asking question. I think first question is related to capacity building. Every country has problem, obstacle with this capacity. Example from Cambodian in terms of cross-cutting issue. As you may see from my slide presentation, our forest is governed by 3 agencies. So the capacity building is remain a problem, but somehow the REDD Plus responsible ministry is Ministry of Environment. They have, I think, they have full capacity to implement. But in the next step that we are going to demonstrate the NFI, so we still lack some behind. But we have support from international donors. So we FAO, UNRED, and FCPF. So we expect that we coming up with a very good result in demonstration size. And for definition, I really agreed with my friend Ghana. So we are not forced to what's called to follow FAO guideline. The definition, we have to be respect our national approach and construct with the national way. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I invite Elizabeth? Maybe you may talk about somehow the South-South cooperation, because you are the more like that way. So capacity building, maybe the entity can help, but can you share some your idea how to promote the reference level through the South-South cooperation?
Maybe just to answer the question, I think moving to higher tiers is something that the region would need capacity. Just to very quickly answer a question, and also probably that's the South-South cooperation that we could look at, sharing experience and also looking at how to fill missing data. Sometimes you may not have emission factors in the region, so we could actually share emission factors, because constructing emission factors can be very expensive. And when there's no money, I think then you have to share. That's my quick statement.
Okay, so Novia.
Yes, thank you for the questions. And regarding the capacity building, I think one of the challenge for Indonesia is that we have to maintain around 4,000 permanent sample plots has been developed since 1990s with the assistance from the FAO, and we are very lucky for that. Thank you. But now the challenge is how to maintain the data, how to maintain this PSP, so we can generate reliable data and in a consistent manner. And what we do is that we work with some development partners, like we work with UNRED in the past, and we work also with the FCPF to do capacity building, because we cannot rely on only technical people from Jakarta, from national level, but we have to do capacity building at some subnational level, because that's one of our concerns. And also in terms of South cooperation or any other cooperation, I would like to share with you that within the ASEAN, we have ARKN FCC, ASEAN Regional Knowledge Network on forest and climate change, and Ibu Elizabeth, Pak Hasan are members from that network. We are happy that we can share our experience, and perhaps in the next future we also do exchange of expert in terms of carbon accounting, MRV, and also on how we can develop our forest reference emission level. I think we are going to start with some colleagues from Thailand who are going to visit us to Indonesia next year, early next year, to do exchange on some technical things. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Novia. Well, I believe that increasing the recognition of the South-South regional cooperation. I believe there are many initiatives coming up. And I invite Dr. Hirata for.
Yes, I have a short comment for the definition. Of course, the definition it's very important, but it's not easy to obtain reliable activity data, particularly from remote sensing by cost-effective approach. So concerning REDD+, we need to check again the definition. Executive methodology.
Thank you. So now I'd like to invite Maria. So you can cover two issues. I mean, the capacity building as well as also, not only the reference level, but the policy development, which are really also important for move forward.
Yeah, just to follow on the definition from Mike, colleague. You have to think in terms of what is feasible to be measured. Also, I think it's good to think in terms of that. I want to define my forest to maximize how I take care of the forest. But if you are not able to measure, then you may compromise your credibility in terms of the reporting. So I think you have to sort of balance this, or you may end up into a cost for monitoring which is not affordable. And it may cost more to monitor than what you may get in exchange. So you have to also think in those terms. While I respect perfectly that each country has a definition that it is the ambition that you have on how to manage your forest and so on, but in terms of monitoring, you have to think in terms of monitoring as well. On capacity building, I think South-South cooperation is fundamental. It's very important. I mean, I want to recall to you that the default factors that IPCC has are very poor, because at that time when the IPCC guidelines were put together, there were no information. But it's a process of refining to be done in the next couple of years. And I want to clarify something. I mean, be careful, because people think in essence that default factors are bad because the default factors today are bad. But after the refinement, we may end up with default factors that are very disaggregated and regional. So maybe much better default factors in the future. And this will depend on how much the information which has been gathered in the last 10 years is contributing to this process of IPCC refinement of the 2006 guidelines. And then, of course, you can go a step forward and do even more disaggregation or whatever you want. But it is very likely that in a couple of years we may end up with much better factors in the IPCC guidelines. And I want to recall that, and I want to encourage everyone to contribute to this process as much as possible.
Maria looks like to provide closing remarks, so I don't need that. I think that the event, and we are running out of time. I'm sorry about could not invite any more question, but I believe after this session, I mean, some of more chance to talk with our speaker. I believe our session was kind of the more, the informative to share the many information around the world, and I think this is somehow the expectation. And I like to express our special thanks to our sixth speaker for your wonderful presentation. Also, I'd like to express our deep appreciation to our audience for your participation and the indulgence to stay with us. I thank you very much for all the patience. So I'd like to thank also our research person, Makoto-san, and then my colleague also with Dr. Tetra. We work together here, and I appreciate your also contribution today. So thank you very much. I wish you have a nice afternoon. Thank you. Yes. Let's have one photo here. Yeah, of course. We are running out of time, but